It is providing you a way where an unified stack, a cloud-ready stack for building distributed applications where files, the configuration files that we usually maintain, like YAML files, XML files, JSON files. So it is taking care of all those nitty-gritties.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Modern.NET Show, the premier .NET podcast focusing entirely on the knowledge, tools, and frameworks that all .NET developers should have in their toolbox. I'm your host, Jamie Taylor, bringing you conversations with the brightest minds in the .NET ecosystem. Today, Joydip Kanjilal returned to the show to talk about Aspire and where it fits in the modern enterprise application stack. Today, Joydip Kanjilal returned to the show to talk about Aspire and where it fits in the modern enterprise application stack. We also talk about how Aspire isn't just for microservices or nanoservices. It will work quite well with modular monoliths too, as long as your application code isn't highly coupled.
Maintaining large-scale distributed systems require deep visibility into how the services are interacting, how the services are behaving over a period of time. So that helps enterprises to understand how the applications are behaving. If something goes wrong, what went wrong? Why is it that the application is not being able to scale? Why is it not able to handle more requests in a specific time period? What are the security loopholes and everything?
One side note, we recorded this episode shortly before Aspire was rebranded for .NET Aspire. So if you're listening to this wondering, wait, that's not what it's called, or wait, my Google searches aren't working, please bear with us because we both used the old branding for half of the episode. Let's hope that the PM for Aspire, Maddie Montequilla, doesn't notice. Sorry, Maddie. Before we jump in, a quick reminder. If the Modern.NET Show has become part of your learning journey, then please consider supporting us through Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. Every contribution helps us to continue bringing you these in-depth conversations with industry experts. You'll find all the links in the show notes. So let's sit back, open up a terminal, type in .NET New Podcast, and we'll dive into the core of modern.NET. Joydip, welcome back to the show. It's been a couple of months since we last talked and a couple of weeks since your last episode where we talked about GitHub Copilot. Folks, if you haven't heard that one, go back and listen to that one. But welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thank you so much.
No worries. So for the folks who maybe haven't heard your previous episode, I was wondering, could you give like a really brief elevator pitch intro to you?
Sure. So this is Joydip. I'm a software architect, Microsoft MVP for 7 years. 6 of them were consecutive. I am from India, and I have been in this industry, in the software industry for the last almost 3 decades. It's more than 25 years now. I have been working in .NET from the time .NET was publicly made available, say around 2000, 2001. So at the time it was in beta, and the very first version of C# was released at that time. From then on, I have seen a lot of developments happen over the years, over the decades, you can say. .NET technologies, all related technologies as far as .NET and its ecosystem is concerned. I've written quite a few books. I have reviewed more than a dozen. And I have written around 1,000 articles in various websites around the world. I blog at InfoWorld, and I on the verge of launching a newsletter as well, where I will be focusing primarily on those aspects of technology where I have been speaking in recent times, like .NET Aspire that I will be speaking about today, on building AI and building AI agents using .NET. And anything and everything around .NET, obviously, and also some other technologies like some other languages which are very popular, which you can work in your integrated integrated development environment as well, like say Python. So I will be talking about that. So I will update my profile accordingly, where I will be updating my profile and mentioning the link to my newsletter where I will be. So when the readers go through those articles, they will be able to learn more about technology that I speak about in the podcast. They will be much more hands-on, so they will be the readers will be able to get source code, hands-on exercises, to get started using those technologies.
So, where we talked the last time about GitHub Copilot, Today we're going to talk about something completely different. We are going to talk about .NET Aspire. There has been a few episodes on .NET Aspire so far, but we're going to take this rather than from like a theoretical, here is what .NET Aspire is, and here are the vague ideas of what you can build with it, which, you know, is the target for more of an intro to .NET Aspire. We're actually going to talk about how you can use it to build enterprise applications using .NET Aspire in sort of a modern way. So I figured maybe the first thing that we could talk about briefly is what .NET Aspire is, because I appreciate that whilst there are folks listening to this show who are at the forefront with us, there are also folks who maybe don't get to try out these new technologies every day during the day-to-day work. They're not as lucky as, say, you or I or some of the other listeners. Maybe if you could tell us real quick what .NET Aspire is, just to set the level.
In order for us to understand .NET Aspire, we first have to understand what the intent of a stack like .NET Aspire is actually. We have to understand the problem. Let's say today, the enterprise systems are not built as single monolithic binaries anyway. And they are not, deployed in a single server. Instead, they are composed of a set of components, APIs, background services, data storage, message brokers, queues, that message brokers that take advantage of queues to handle how messages are routed, delivered. And we also have front-end interfaces to interact with these services. So display the data that is captured from these services into a user interface, in the presentation layer of the application. Now, in addition to offering the compelling advantages such as scalability, resilience, these distributed applications can also have several challenges, like, say, in service discovery, in configuration, observability, deployment, and all. Because we are using a plethora of technologies, where the technologies may not be using the same technology stack. They may be different. Like, say, I may be using Kafka for messaging. I may be using PostgreSQL for database. I may be using .NET Web API. I may be using Quads for background services. Background, you can say, jobs. Now, these are all, third-party components. So, these are not created by Microsoft. They don't use the CLR. In order for us to use the umbrella of these technologies, we need an opinionated stack, a framework for building, deploying, or orchestrating, monitoring, and observing applications, distributed applications that leverage all these technologies. Now, when we come to .NET Aspire, so it is a cloud-optimized framework which is tailored for the development of production-grade distributed applications, and it is an opinionated stack which it is cloud-ready, and it itself provides you the entire suite that you need to build a distributed application. So when you create an application in Aspire, for example, I'll just briefly give you an example. When you create an application in Aspire, so you end up having several projects. Like, you say, you have an API project, you have an app host project, you have the service defaults, you have the web project, and you have the test projects as well. Now, the reason is that, so it is built in such a way that you don't have to bother about having to maintain these layers or these technologies, aggregating them, getting them unified inside a single umbrella. So you don't have to worry about that. So it is providing you a template, you can say, where you can use all these technologies in the same, you can say, platform. The main intent is that it is providing you a way where an unified stack, a cloud-ready stack for building distributed applications, where the configuration files that we usually maintain, like YAML files, XML files, JSON files. So it is taking care of all those nitty-gritties. You don't have to worry about how they need to be configured. You can say simplified configuration, where you have multiple projects, but you don't even have to worry about the external dependencies, like, say, you are using PostgreSQL, you are using RabbitMQ, you are using Redis. They will all be linked effortlessly. You don't have to worry about how they are being configured internally. Of course, you have to mention where they have been hosted, but it is providing you a single umbrella where these technologies can be unified, without having to bother about how they actually are being configured so that they can run together. So you use client libraries, you use components, you use external services, but you don't need to bother about how to configure them. You just have to specify where they reside. the internal integrations of configuration, that hassle is taken care of by .NET Aspire. And that is why Microsoft says that it provides an unified stack where it provides you NuGet packages that can handle the specific cloud native concerns. Like, say, if you want to connect to, say, Redis, if you want to connect to, say, PostgreSQL, if you want to connect to SQL Server as a database, if you have any third party, think of any third party component that has as .NET Aspire can connect to. So they all are available through NuGet packages. So you just have to ensure that those packages are available. You add those packages, and then it will be very easy for you to connect to them from your application. So that is why it provides a great tool. I will say the stack. The stack is the right word. A cloud-ready, opinionated stack which is designed to simplify how developers can build observable, production-ready, distributed application. So it streamlines how developers can build, deploy, monitor, of course, cloud-native apps by handling much of the setup, operational setup out of the box. You don't have to worry about how they are being configured. You don't have to spend time configuring the infrastructure, wiring up the components, wiring up the services. That is taken care of by Aspire. And that is what the main intent of Aspire is. But again, Aspire is not meant only for microservices. That is a common misconception. It is not, in reality, it is not about only microservices. I've seen many developers feel that it is used only for microservices. I have seen them, building microservices the moment they create a .NET Aspire application in Visual Studio. But in reality, it can be used for your modular monoliths also. It can be connected to any cloud. It is not that it needs Azure to run. It can run in any cloud. It can internally use telemetry, resources, health. It can provide you a single dashboard where you can see how your application has been behaving. So all those components have been wired up together. But again, it is not in reality meant only for building microservices. It is for building cloud native and even apps which are enterprise. They may not be residing in the cloud. They may not be working in the cloud. But here is the catch. If your application is not using cloud, if your application is not using containers, if you are suppose you are not using Docker, so some of the features of Aspire in your application will be missing. So you will not be able to use them. So I will say the recommended way to use Aspire is using cloud native services, using services that are hosted in the cloud, and also using containerization. So Microsoft is rigid here. It's not that it cannot run without it. It's just a template. It's providing a platform where you can design your services. You can design your front end by default. It will be generating Blazor in the web project. It does not mean that you have to use Blazor only. You can use React. You can use anything. To sum it up, Aspire is a platform where you can build, deploy, monitor cloud native applications without having to be bothered about the way components are wired together, how they are configured internally, and blah, blah. But it does not necessarily mean that it is only meant for microservices. It can handle service discovery. It can handle dependencies. It can handle the monitor and display in the dashboard, in a common place, how your application has been behaving. But again, it is not that it has to run only on the cloud. But the recommended way to use Aspire is deploy your services in the cloud. So to get the best of this Aspire stack, this stack provided by Microsoft, you should host your application somewhere in the cloud, because that way, it will be easy. It is meant for distributed applications. So the moment you distribute your services, the moment you distribute your components, in that case, you can leverage Aspire, the features of Aspire, the benefits of Aspire, what Aspire needs to provide you in a much better way. And the name Aspire, .NET Aspire was named Aspire because it is developers' aspiration to have a framework. I will say rather not a framework. Of course, it is a framework, but a better word will be to provide a cloud-ready stack where you can build, deploy, monitor your cloud-native applications. The moment you create an application in Aspire, you will see multiple projects created. There will be 4 or 5 projects, depending on what you have selected at the time of creating the project in Visual Studio. But then never be carried away by the fact that you are constrained to using only Blazor in your front end. You can use anything. Or never be constrained about using SQL Server or PostgreSQL. There is no constraint. You can just use anything, but when the template is generated for you, it will provide you certain guidelines, I will say. Even in the test project, with the test project, if you have opted for having a test project at the time when you are creating the Aspire application in Visual Studio, a test, a unit test method or an integration test method will be provided for you by default. It does not necessarily mean that you have to use it. It's just a guidance. I will say Microsoft's template, which provides a cloud-ready stack for building cloud-native applications, where Microsoft is providing you a guidance that you can follow this route to build and host your application in such a way it can be maintained, it can be scaled. You can change your components. Your components become pluggable, so that way it becomes easy to change and maintain over a period of time, and of course scale as well. And at the moment you have your telemetry, which are already embedded in the Aspire stack. It makes it very easy for you to judge how your application has been behaving in real time. So that way you can take necessary steps to improve the performance of your application.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is .NET Aspire is more of like a orchestrator of your app, right? Rather than having to spend the time writing, say, a Docker compose file or even touching Docker files. We'll come on to this later because
yes,
my understanding is you can actually point at a pre-existing Docker file and include that. But what we can do is we can say, here is a collection of technologies that make up my application. Maybe it's one or maybe more databases in different technologies. A front-end technology, doesn't matter what it is. A couple of back-end services, maybe an authentication endpoint in one technology, maybe data access in a different technology, or something along those lines, right? We've got as it were, a smorgasbord of technologies that make up our application. Maybe we have like an Umbraco front end and things like that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we've got a whole stack of different technologies. We can throw them at Aspire with some configuration. We have to do some manual configuration of that at build time. And then what happens is Aspire steps in and says, cool, so the connection string for the database is this. So I will replace that at runtime with the actual path to the connection string, or the URL for this particular service that I know about is doing that round robin service discovery. It will replace that URL at runtime with the actual URL of that particular endpoint. So you can just put say you've got an API that does authentication, you might want to call it authentication API endpoint. And what will happen is Aspire will do some magic. We don't have to worry about the magic just yet. Do some magic to replace authentication API endpoint with localhost, 7001/API for local. But when you push it to whatever cloud you're pushing it on, it will then go, cool, this is, Jamie's super amazing authenticated API.azurewebsites.net/API. But it does that at runtime for us because it's already done that discovery phase, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. You're bang on. So just to add to what we were saying, like .NET Aspire, you can say it's an initiative aimed at enhancing the development experience for developers intending to build a cloud-native applications in the .NET ecosystem. And the primary objectives, there are three primary objectives of .NET Aspire. One is orchestration, one is components, and one is tooling. As far as orchestration is concerned, it helps developers for orchestrating multi-project applications and their integrate dependencies. This functionality ensures that there is a smooth execution and seamless connectivity between diverse components within the same platform, but they are maybe built with different technologies. And as far as components are concerned, these are encapsulated within the NuGet packages. So you can use .NET Aspire to connect to these third-party components, say Redis container, a Postgres. You can connect to a SQL Server. You can connect to Kafka. So all these are available using NuGet packages. And then you have starter templates, that's the tooling part of it, where you can incorporate a comprehensive set of tools that are tailored to streamline the development workflow as a whole. So you have project templates and tooling experiences that are integrated into your development IDE itself. So that is where Microsoft empowers the developers to create and interact with the apps that comprise your .NET Aspire ecosystem, the applications that you are building. Since it will be having many components, a plethora of components, services, third-party components as well. So it is providing you a tooling framework that enhances the productivity, and it provides a cohesive environment for developing and managing everything, right from configuration, tooling, to how you can configure them, because configuration, the internal integrations, they are taken care of by Aspire, but at least you have to mention where it has to connect. Like say in your app host, that is app host project that will be created for you by default when you create a new .NET Aspire project, is configure the different projects and the services that your application needs to connect to. So these are the three main areas where objectives or the core objectives of Aspire. One is orchestration, one is components, and one is tooling. And essentially, .NET Aspire is a holistic solution addressing key aspects of specific cloud native concerns such as orchestration, component integration, tooling, scaling, performance optimization using a unified framework.
And that makes sense, right? Because there are so many tools out there to be able to do all of this, orchestration and tooling and system setup and all this kind of stuff. Like, I remember talking to David Fowler about Aspire when they first started releasing it. And I was like, so why does this exist, right? I didn't put it like that, but that was essentially the question I asked. And he said, I hate YAML.
Yeah.
And, especially since there are multiple flavors of YAML, and depending on what you're doing, you need a different flavor of it. And all this. This is why it's so difficult to get started in this industry, right? Everyone's got an opinion. But I think you're right that the opinionated base. So the problem is that in .NET specifically, we kind of don't have, until Aspire came along, we kind of didn't have an opinionated way to build microservices, right? And it's not like this is the only way, but this is a way that you can do it. And it strips away all of the difficulty for you, right? So you can actually, we'll get onto this in a second, but essentially, once you've installed the template with like .NET new template install or whatever it is, or if you're running a relatively recent version of Rider or Visual Studio, you can actually go file a new project and it's all there, right? When you do that, it sets everything up for you. So like there is a new template, like you said, there's like an app host, which is like your central part that controls everything. And then you just register different application components within that and you push go and it just works, right? Because I've had a couple of clients over the last few months where just getting onboarded, it was a case of, cool, okay, follow this guide. Great, I'm on Mac OS. Then none of this is going to work because you've assumed everyone's on Windows. .NET's open source now and cross-platform, so I can do this on a Mac. So then I translate all of the instructions, possibly with the help of an LLM, translate all of the instructions to my Mac, run all of these commands bare on my Mac, making system-level changes, and then the app eventually works. And there's no undo setup, right? Whereas like with things like Aspire and other frameworks have their way of doing it too. You can git clone and then do the equivalent of .NET Run and everything just appears, right? All of that pain and setup is taken care of for you, right? And I guess that's one of the two problems that Aspire is designed to solve, isn't it? I feel like I've fed you the answer here, but I'm interested in your opinion, right? It's the developer tooling and the potentially cloud, but also on-prem hosting model, right? And since it's both the same way of doing it, it isn't really, but like from a 10,000-foot view, since it's the same way of doing it, you effectively remove the "it works on my machine" excuse, right?
So I what I feel is, this is one of the ways in which I explain .NET Aspire whenever I have a word with the teams that work with me around the globe. It is a solution to developers' frustrations. When the developers want to deploy cloud-native applications, there are so many concerns. Concerns in the sense, hassles, challenges in wiring all the components together, getting everything working in the cloud. So Aspire is a solution because it provides a simplified way to get your application cloud ready. So it saves a lot of your time, and I will say it is Microsoft's way to provide a framework which serves as a guidance for developers to build, deploy, and monitor, of course, cloud-native applications. It does not necessarily mean that the way that the projects have been created, the solution structure, it can be changed. It's just a guidance. It is, well thought out when Microsoft came up with this solution to building enterprise applications that run on the cloud. Because you definitely need a test project, you need a web project, you need your services running in the background. You need also a place where you can wire up your configurations, components. So that is what is app host. But again, it is just a guidance which can be extended as well. It depends on the developers to what extent they want to extend it. It is provided by Microsoft to simplify cloud native development. It does not necessarily mean you have to use exactly whatever Microsoft has provided. You can connect to any company, you can connect to any service. Your API projects can be multiple, because if you are building a microservice, most importantly, if you are trying to apply your architectural patterns on top of it, you can do that. There is no constraint as such. It's just a template that you can follow, extend, and use it your own way.
100%, I agree. Yep.
Let's say Docker. Nowhere has Microsoft specified that you have to follow. You have to use containerization. You have to use cloud, without which Aspire will not run. It's nothing like that. But it is recommended that you use containerization to leverage the benefits that Aspire provides, and also you host your services in the cloud so that you can scale your services in a much better, efficient, and I will say seamless manner. But nobody is stopping you from using Aspire the way you want it to. And the best benefit is that it eases your configuration. You don't, I am, Jamie, I don't like using configuration files like XAML or XML or even JSON files, so where I need to specify so many things, if at all. If there's any tooling that can generate that for me, it saves a lot of my time. So obviously, yes, that's a great advantage for developers, building enterprise applications using the .NET ecosystem.
And that makes perfect sense, right? Like, one of the things that we haven't really, I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit where you said, it doesn't matter. It could be Postgres, it could be Blazor, it could be whatever. The really cool thing, and I had to go and read the documentation just to double check that this has been publicly released, is that it can run TypeScript apps now, like natively. So it doesn't have to be .NET specific, right? So you can have your Aspire app host and say, well, actually, my server-side component is TypeScript, or maybe my front-end component is React, which uses TypeScript. So use this version of the compiler and these NPM setups and things like that. So yeah, it greatly reduces that developer tool burden. And even when it comes to publishing to public, private cloud, on-prem infrastructure or whatever, it just greatly reduces everything, right? Which helps with that inner loop for the developers, right?
Yes.
Today's episode of the Modern.NET Show is brought to you by RJJ Software, strategic technology consulting for ambitious SMEs. You know me as the host of this podcast, but here's what you might not know. I'm also a Microsoft MVP who's helped businesses from Formula One teams to funded startups to transform technology from a cost center to a competitive advantage. At RJJ Software, we specialize in 3 things that matter to growing businesses. AI that actually delivers return on investment, not hype, just practical implementations that pay for themselves. Developer experience optimization. We've helped teams to achieve 99% faster deployments and 3x productivity gains. And strategic technology decisions, from architecture reviews to fractional CTO services. The difference? We don't just advise. We ensure successful implementation through knowledge transfer to your team. If you're an SME leader wondering why your technology investments aren't delivering, or if you're facing critical decisions about AI, modernization, or team productivity, let's talk. Visit rjj-software.co.uk/podcast to book a strategic consultation. Now let's get back to today's episode. So we started this conversation with what is Aspire, but the goal is to talk about building modern enterprise apps with Aspire. So what specifically makes this useful for enterprise teams, right? I feel like we've covered some of it already, but like, let's say we've got an enterprise team of maybe 40 developers, double-digit team, and we're all working on maybe one application that's broken into 10, 12 different microservices, and I want to be able to say to the team, okay, here is the backlog, here is the source code, talk to your individual project manager about which piece of work you need to do, go. Like, how does Aspire make that easier or more? What is it that's useful about Aspire for that team?
So Aspire adds a lot of value, business value to enterprises, especially useful for enterprise teams because it reduces the configuration drift and standardizes how services are wired, observed, and can run across different components or services. Since it saves a lot of development time and effort, so that way, developers can focus on something else, which will definitely amplify the productivity. Like say, accelerated development, that is faster development, or you can say rather, is one of the biggest benefits of using Aspire, because the your App Force project that serves as a single source of truth. The architecture of the application is defined in code. You're not using XAML, you're not using XML files. The architecture is defined rather using C# code in App Force, making it easy for even new team members who join the team to understand how the system structure has been designed by just reading one single file. You have integrations to third-party components, third-party services using NuGet packages, where the dependencies, they are expressed using your C# code. Observability and monitoring, that is inbuilt. Maintaining large-scale distributed systems require deep visibility into how the services are interacting, how the services are behaving over a period of time. So that helps enterprises to understand how the applications are behaving. If something goes wrong, what went wrong? Why is it that the application is not being able to scale? Why is it not it's able to handle more requests in a specific time period? What are the security loopholes and everything? And that because of this observability and monitoring, where everything is presented in a unified dashboard, a web-based dashboard that provides real-time access to logs, metrics, distributed traces for every part of your application without you having to do any manual setup at all. It is built on open telemetry, ensuring that the telemetry data that is collected during the development can be transitioned to the production tools. Like you can use Azure Monitor. So if you think of the enterprise, I will tell you from my experience, at that time, there was no Aspire. When I was working for the company I worked for last in 2017, and that was Dell. At Dell, one of the biggest constraints was there were so many services working. The Dell application actually was meant only for internal use. It was not to be used or deployed to any other company. It's only for use in Dell, because Dell is such a vast company that it has to have a way to, display their products that are being sold for maintenance. Maintenance is being extended. Suppose you buy a laptop, you would want to exchange the laptop within the warranty period because it is not working. So everything, you have a unified application where it is handling end to end of how the products sold at Dell can be handled, managed, I will say. There are so many users accessing the Dell service and Dell services application at the same point of time. So many services are running. So the services have to scale. What Aspire presents today at that point of time, in 2017, we have had create a dashboard without Aspire, of course, because there was no Aspire at that time. And we have had to write code for that. We had to ensure that we are able to capture telemetry data and present it so that we can know where things are going wrong. We can know which services are not responding the way it should, unable to scale. They are becoming slow, where we have specified a threshold that it has to provide a response within this such and such time. So that threshold is not being met. Suppose we have to have a way to monitor how many requests goes to a particular service. I mean, how many requests goes to a particular service at any given point of time. So all these things were captured and presented for our internal use. Like we architects and developers, we have to know this to provide the best way the application can scale. But then, had there been Aspire at that time, it would have been really, really great. And that is why I am saying, like, Aspire presents unified dashboard where you have everything, and you can easily find out what went wrong if your application does not behave the way you want it to. You have deployment flexibility. You can use Docker. You can use Kubernetes. You can use microservices. You can use nano services. You can have observability monitoring and observability in a unified dashboard without you having to write too many. So the framework, this unified platform that is presented by Microsoft to developers and architects worldwide, it cuts away a lot of your development effort. So you can save your time and focus on something else, which can definitely add business value for enterprises worldwide, whoever is using .NET Aspire.
Okay, so if I am enterprise team lead and I'm thinking, let's bring in .NET Aspire and let's say I have some already pre-existing microservices that build up my application and I'm not using .NET Aspire, or rather not using Aspire. Please don't hate me, Maddie. They're going through a rebrand at the minute. So we need to be careful of that. But let's say I have a set of microservices that build up my app and I'm not using Aspire at the minute. I know that it's not a zero uplift, but there is some uplift required to put Aspire in place. And I know that once I've gotten through the setup, setting up Aspire and wiring everything together, I know that things are going to be simpler. So that's the impetus for going ahead and putting that in place, right?
Absolutely.
I think also for the people in that position where I already have a pre-existing application made up of microservices and I need to figure out how to do it, whilst it is a non-trivial step, I think it's worth folks, and I'll put a link in the show notes, going and checking out I think they call it the Aspire Fridays or Aspiri Fridays or Aspire Fridays or whatever. It's something like that, right? The Aspire team have their own YouTube channel and Twitch and all that kind of stuff. And they live stream on a Friday, or they had been doing up until the point of recording, taking any open source application that they can find that's made up of a bunch of different microservices and effectively building Aspire into it to see how long it would take. And I think the longest one that I've seen is when they took Bitwarden, I think it was, the Bitwarden, the password manager, and the phrase that they're using is Aspirified, right? Where they Aspirified the whole app, the back-end services, the UI, and even the Chrome extension, and got that all working with .NET Aspire, or rather with Aspire. And it only took them, I think, about 3 hours, and that included the time at the beginning where they were all making fun of each other and being a bit silly and going, whoops, we haven't set this up and we haven't set that up. So there is a considerable uplift, but depending on the complexity of your application, I'm thinking maybe a couple of days of uplift, right? It's not like it's the most difficult thing to do to, I guess, Aspirify or to convert an application such that it has Aspire running behind it.
Absolutely. That's correct.
And then I guess once you've done that, there's not just the tooling side of it. I mean, we've hinted at it a few times, and you have certainly hinted at it more than I have, but you get telemetry along with it, right? You get an open telemetry dashboard with like traces and things like that, which I feel is supremely important for enterprise, right? We like our metrics and our dashboards in the enterprise world. So I wonder, could you talk about that and how that's maybe once we've Aspirified something, or when we start from greenfield, we have that telemetry and that becomes part of the experience, right? Rather than, oh, snap, we've released and we don't have any dashboards. How do we add those, right?
Yeah, so telemetry in Aspire, it provides a built-in automated observability for distributed applications by enabling you to collect logs, traces, and metrics using the open telemetry standards, enabling developers to diagnose issues much faster, track the service performance, visualize how the services are interacting with each other in real time in a unified, integrated dashboard. Actually, the primary objective of telemetry in .NET Aspire is that by providing you an unified dashboard, it helps you in faster troubleshooting because you can visualize your logs, traces, and metrics at real time. You can quickly diagnose the errors. You have support for distributed tracing where it maps the path of the request across multiple services, like say where these services have been moving through from the time the services were called. So this real-time monitoring, this built-in observability that is provided by Aspire, by adhering to the open telemetry standards, it enables the developers to understand the performance, scalability, what went wrong, the requests that can be handled. Most importantly, so that developers and architects working on enterprise applications in Aspire can understand what are the strategies that should be adopted to make the services scale more. So that way, I mean, telemetry is great, and the best part of it is once you have something where you can explore more while you don't have to, write tedious, monotonous code or write code to configure, which takes away a lot of your productive time. if that is taken away from your day-to-day activities, like you don't have to bother about how it internally being configured and all those stuff, blah blah. At that time, what you can focus on something which is much more fruitful. So that way, the productivity of the teams also, enhance, can be improved considerably, and that is where the enterprises, they can leverage Aspire. One of the biggest benefits of Aspire, I feel, is telemetry. And again, I forgot to mention, by utilizing service defaults, it integrates the instrumentation of HTTP clients and by reducing the manual configuration. That way, I mean, every way possible, Microsoft has taken away the configuration code, the internal nitty-gritties, the tedious effort that you have to otherwise put into your part in order to build your application. So that way, what is happening is like you have much more time to focus on writing your business logic, focusing on aspects like security, scalability, performance, and so this way, enterprises can benefit because the throughput, the amount of output that team can provide, a development team can provide in a span of time, that is amplified. So that is where Aspire scales, and that is why Aspire has become so popular. It has been widely used worldwide.
Absolutely. I mean, like, logging only gets you so far, right? Especially if you don't know if you're logging enough. And I think that everybody approaches logging differently, right? And the way that I do it is I log everything whilst I'm running on my local machine, and then I can dial it down because it's impossible to add more logs after the fact, right? But with metrics and telemetry, it's there from day one, right? You can see in a graph where your hot paths are and the blocks of code which take the longest to process your application, right? And so it makes it way easier to sort of debug that stuff and helps with like the measure twice, cut once for benchmarking and all that kind of stuff. So I absolutely agree that like the telemetry that's built in is the biggest upsell for Aspire. I think it's also worth noting, I'm going to say this, and I don't know how much public knowledge this is, so I may get in trouble, but that's okay. I can always edit the episode after the fact. Aspire isn't just something that the Aspire team have put out and gone, yeah, you should use this, right? There are key pieces of Microsoft's own internal infrastructure that run on Aspire. Some people don't like it, but Bing runs on Aspire, right? It's a series of .NET apps that run on Aspire. So if you've used Bing, you've used Aspire, right? They're using it in production. So if it's good enough for them, it's probably good enough for you, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're bang on. And so, what all matters is that whether the application that I'm building and deploying is high performance, secure, and can scale. These are the three main parameters needed in any enterprise application. And of course, it should be maintainable. And if you use Aspire, you have a platform where you can leverage these benefits easily, because it is using your effort. It is cutting away a lot of your effort where otherwise you would have to spend in writing tedious code as far as for configuration. Like you don't have to spend time on configuring the components. I mean, that is why honestly, that is why I like Aspire so much, because I don't have to write monotonous code. It was terrible, writing so much of configuration. If you think not many years back, say 6 or 7 years back, or maybe a decade back, it was really, really very tedious to write so many lines of code to get everything configured properly when running applications in the cloud.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Not having to write that tedious code means that we can speed everything up, right? We talked about it earlier on. You talked about it very explicitly earlier on about developer effectiveness and developer productivity. And if we don't have to wire up the boring stuff, the tedious stuff, then that means that we can jump directly to providing value to the end customer, right? Because as much as we might enjoy, some people might enjoy it, some people don't, of doing the tedious bits of adding the telemetry in and adding the metrics in and all that kind of stuff, that doesn't add any immediate value, to the end customer, right? The end customer wants to be able to, when I push the button to order the thing, I know that within 24, 48, 72 hours, the thing will be delivered to me. I don't care about the metrics and the logging and the system stability and all that stuff. Well, maybe I care about system stability.
Yes, absolutely.
But what I care about is when I push the button and I give you the money, you give me the thing, right? And so we need to always really focus on that. And so not having to do the tedious bits of wiring all of the metrics and the logging and the tracing and the telemetry, all of that, not having to create the dashboard because there is a dashboard created for you. It might not be specifically tailored to your enterprise's needs, but there is a starter one there, right? And being able to grab all of those things and feed them into Kafka or whatever to be able to build your own dashboards. I think that's the superpower right there, right? It takes this huge chunk, like we talked about earlier on, this huge chunk of the busy work. It's not necessarily difficult. It just takes a sprint, a couple of sprints to set all of this stuff up. If we can push a button and it's already set up for us, then that's what we do, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it really dotted Aspire adds value by accelerating development, reducing the operational complexities, and ensuring high quality, reliable cloud-native development. It accelerates developer onboarding as well. Not only developer productivity, but new developers when they join. So it really eases getting started with in your application fast. It reduces the development costs, faster time to market, reduced risks as well, and of course the best part is I feel observability and monitoring. Reduction in development cost is again an excellent way for .NET Aspire to add business value to enterprises, because that is what is needed. When the development costs reduce on a particular project, so I can ask my developers that, hey, I mean, you don't have to write so much of code because Aspire is providing that for you. You're already having a cloud-ready platform with you. So that is why I need this from you. I need that from you. So that way, enterprises can demand more from developers and architects working on the enterprise applications. And not only that, added to that, faster time to market. So on one hand, the development costs get reduced because the developers can quickly connect to databases, services, caches, message queues, and everything. And they don't have to write repetitive code and infrastructure code. So that way, the development cost obviously gets reduced. And at the same time, it also facilitates faster time to market. That is where the businesses can benefit a lot, because that is what is absolutely needed. Because businesses need to scale. So they need high quality applications faster. I mean, rolling out new services, new updates, it really helps businesses, right, in the long run. So that is why, because to a business, if I'm a businessman, what all matters to me is that whether I can launch products faster, launch products that are scalable, that are high performant, that are secure faster. I may or may not be concerned at all with what Aspire is providing, but I know that, yes, Aspire adds a lot of value to the business. So I will take it from the business perspective. I don't want to go into the technical intricacies because I'm a businessman. And that is why it has become so very popular worldwide and so quickly as well.
Yeah. And you've kind of explored most of the points I wanted to make, but you're absolutely right. It's and I sound just like Claude. But yeah, it really is becoming the technology du jour, I guess. Just real quick on that, I talked earlier about I can maybe take the pain of Aspirifying an app in maybe a week, maybe a sprint, maybe 2 sprints. Is it an all or nothing change, or is it something that I can do incrementally, right? So I have an existing system. We talked about earlier on, I've got an existing system, I've got a team of 40 developers. I'm going to take 10 of those developers away, put them on a branch and say, Aspirify my system. Do I need to do it all at once, or can I, like, every sprint for the next number of sprints, slowly replace everything, or rather slowly add that app host infrastructure underneath my application? So that then when I'm ready, I can go, cool, right, let's move over to hosting the app as an Aspirified app in production. Is that something that I can do, or is that something that, from your perspective as an expert on this, is the advice to halt production and actually just spend however long is required to Aspirify it? Or is it a case of keep going, keep adding, user value, but have a small team that every sprint, every 2 sprints, every whatever, they then incrementally add Aspirified setup? I don't know. I feel like I've used all of my words, right?
That's an excellent point. I mean, I feel that to add Aspire to an existing project, the best way to get started is that you have to understand the services in the existing project which is not using Aspire, the business rules of the application, the service boundaries, and then you have to identify where and how you can plug in an orchestrator to manage the services and a service defaults project as well for the configurations. So if your application is modular, I will say it will not take a lot of time and effort. So parallel to the current development, what I can say is that in order to Aspirify that project, you can have a few developers, a set of developers who can go ahead adding the orchestration part, I mean the app host project, the service defaults, while at the same time not changing anything in the existing code base. This will work provided your application is modular, is well structured. It does not necessarily need to be microservice or a nano service. It can be anything, but it has to be modular so that the service boundaries are well defined. If it is not in that case, I feel you should not right away get started with Aspire. Rather, you should first make your application modular. Your application's components should be cohesive, but they should be loosely coupled. If the coupling is high, in that case, I will say it is pointless to implement anything new to an existing application unless the coupling is reduced, because plugging anything new would become very, very difficult, and many features of the application might fail as well. So to come back to your point, Aspirifying a project, I feel the two main things that you have to first consider is that you need an orchestrator and you need a service defaults project for the configuration. And then you can slowly and steadily go ahead getting them connected to the right place. But then, again, I am repeating the same thing again and again, and that is, if your application is not modular, if it is not loosely coupled, it will really be a lot of effort. So we should do that first, then get started using Aspire.
Okay. What I'm hearing is, if you've literally just said it, but let me just make sure I've understood. So if your application is heavily coupled, then it's, you're going to have trouble.
Yes.
But you're going to have trouble if you want to shift to a cloud native stack of any technology, right? Because the whole point of cloud native, whether it's microservices or whatever, reducing that coupling where possible makes sense, right? And it'll make your app, 30, 40 years of scientific papers and real world examples have shown that if your app code base is loosely coupled but tightly cohesive, you'll have a better time with testing and mocking and runtime optimizations and just being able to manage it from a humans managing code perspective. So to your point, if your application is already quite highly coupled, perhaps investigate, can we start decoupling this application and just putting in maybe layers of abstraction or something that helps to make our code a little bit easier to manage, because a change over here should not really affect the code over there as long as the API between them stays the same, right? As a really silly example, if I create a method that takes two numbers and adds them together and then returns that addition, right? It doesn't matter to the calling, the consumer of that method, what else happens in there. I could do, add your two numbers together, but then do a whole bunch of other maths that's not related to what you want, and then return you the sum of those two integers. Doesn't matter what's happening in the middle. As long as, from the consumer's perspective, I give you two integers, you give me the sum, doesn't matter. And that is loosely coupled, because all I know is I give you two integers, you give me a different integer that is the sum of those integers. That's all I need to know. So what I'm getting is, as with any application, applying standard software engineering principles first. If your application is highly coupled, maybe look into decoupling it, because it will be better for you anyway, regardless of whether you use Aspire.
Yes.
And then if you want to use Aspire, once your application is decoupled, or if your application is decoupled, regardless of whether it's microservices or not, or nano services, or whatever term we're going to use, even modular monoliths will work. You can start putting the work in to, as we said earlier on, Aspirify your application by putting in the app host and starting to carve off pieces. Sounds really, really violent, but you get what I mean, right? Taking a chunk of it and putting it into the Aspire runtime. You know that moment when a technical concept finally clicks? That's what we're all about here at the Modern.net Show. We can stay independent thanks to listeners like you. If you've learned something valuable from the show, please consider joining our Patreon or buy me a coffee. You'll find links in the show notes. We're a listener-supported and, at times, ad-supported production, so every bit of support that you can give makes a difference. Thank you. That's really cool. So, my big worry is that we're going to start running out of time. As we start to wrap up, people will be listening to this going, yeah, okay, cool. I want to check out Aspire and I want to check out some of Joydip's. You've said earlier on, 1,000 articles and lots of books and things like that. So where's the best place to find out what's going on with you in that sort of realm of articles you've published, books you're publishing? And where is the best place for me to go and learn about like Aspire? So I want to start aspirifying something. I've heard Joydip tell me, it's worth the pain, although the pain is very small. It's worth the pain. So how do I go and learn that pain, right? How do I go and learn to do that?
That's what just give me a few days. I mean, most probably this weekend, maybe this weekend, I will be launching my newsletter where I will be focusing on the hands-on part of all that I have discussed in recent times, in the last few years, or in podcasts and webcasts, because I frequently get emails where the readers want to know, how to use that technology. So, like I said, like we discussed about Aspire today, but it would be great if you can write an article where I can present a detailed step-by-step guide on how to use Aspire from the time you build your application till you deploy to any cloud like Azure or whatever, and how you scale it, how you can improve the performance, how you monitor it, how telemetry works, and everything. So that way, I mean, keeping this in mind, I have planned to launch this new newsletter, because otherwise I am discussing many technologies for the last few years, like I have been doing this here in your platform. But the thing is that it becomes, a bit abstract for the readers unless they get to know a sense of it, how actually they have to use Aspire. The same way like using AI in Visual Studio Copilot, like we discussed about Copilot, but it would be great if I can, provide a guide so that they can go through it, and it would be hands-on completely with snippets of code, screenshots, I mean, providing them an end-to-end guidance on how to use Copilot and also Aspire as we discussed today. Once it is live, immediately I'll send you an email with the link to that.
Sure, yeah, and I'll make a point to put that into the show notes as soon as that comes out. For the folks who are listening in, there's a bit of a lead time between when we record and when it goes out. So there's a bit of a backlog. There'll be a bit of a gap in time between when we record this and when it goes out. But I will make a point of getting links from Joydip to all of the things that he's talking about and putting them into the show notes. So if you are interested, press through, click through, whatever action it is you do to go through to the show notes, and there'll be links to everything on there. So what about getting started with Aspire then? Let's say we use user stories all the time, right? As a developer who has never heard of Aspire, has heard this episode and gone, that's it, I want to go and learn that. Where do I go to sort of start that journey?
First, the most important aspect that a developer has to know is the developer has to understand the problem. What are the pain points in building modern enterprise systems? Because they are no longer single monolithic binaries. They are no longer deployed on a single server. They're composed of a plethora of APIs and components and services. So there is where the pain point lies. Because configuring them and getting them unified in a single platform, that becomes very, very difficult. It consumes a lot of time. So that is where the pain point lies, and that is where the developers have to understand why developers should use this Aspire actually. By understanding the problem, the pain points, then the developers have to understand what is a cloud native application, what is scalability, what is resilience, what are the capabilities of cloud native, and why we talk about cloud native these days. So what makes an application cloud native, and where is it that Aspire can help in building cloud native applications? Then the developer should understand, parallel to learning about cloud native, the developer should understand about microservices. They should be able to understand about nano services, like why do we need services and how Aspire helps in building microservice applications, microservice-based applications. What makes a stack opinionated? So all those areas, they have to know what actually Aspire provides. What are the features like orchestration, service discovery, what actually service discovery means, what is resilience, what is that Aspire shows in the dashboard, how Aspire can be used to integrate with third-party services and components. We say that Aspire has support for cross-platform technologies. That is where it helps you to connect to non.NET components built using non.NET technologies, like you are using, say, Kafka, you're using Redis, but you're still connecting from the same development stack, I will say, the ecosystem, I will rather say. To sum it up, they have to first understand what is the exact problem, why I need Aspire, what is the problem that he wants to solve, what is the pain point of building an enterprise application, and then they have to understand about cloud native, microservices, nanoservices, and then they have to get started building a very simple application. This is exactly what I would like to focus on, a series of articles that I will be writing about Aspire and Copilot and etc. that I've been talking about for the last few years. But again, to get started, any technology, I will always say that first, the developer should understand the problem that particular technology is trying to solve. So the best way to learn Aspire is to understand what it is meant for, what it is trying to solve.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so what I will do is I will be in touch with you. This is, I'll leave this in so that folks can hear this, but it makes me accountable, right? I'm accountable to the listeners. I'll be in touch with you as you start to release these blog posts you were talking about and different articles that folks can go and check out. And I'll make a point of putting them into the show notes. So, folks, there may be a case where this episode has been released, and then I go back and alter the show notes to add more links. But what I'll do is make sure that you are checking out Joydip's website, which will be in the show notes, and make sure that you're subscribed to that newsletter when it starts dropping, and then you'll get the notification directly, right? You don't have to require me to remind you, right?
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Joydip, for joining us today to talk about Aspire and to give folks a real sort of indication of why it might be useful for them to know this from an enterprise dev perspective. Because a lot of the demos I've seen out there and a lot of the talks that I've been to have been, Aspire is great. Yeah, let's put Aspire on something. And there hasn't been really a discussion as to what it actually gives you from like from a cost benefit analysis, which I feel like we covered today. And, some of the things that are important to know about these kinds of things, all the different technologies that we can use from an enterprise perspective, because most of us listening to this show, and I count myself included in that, because listeners, I go back and listen to the early episodes so that I can relearn some things. It's a great resource. Most of us do work in the enterprise, whether we are contractors, consultants, or employees, or whatever phrase you want to use. Most of us live in that world of enterprise. So when someone steps up onto a stage and says, let me give you 45 minutes of learning this technology and then you can go away and do this, they don't cover all the things that are actually important for the enterprise developers because, hey, pro tip listeners, most of those speakers are paid to be there. So there isn't actually a drive to be at a point where it's like, let's talk about the problems you're going to have. I'm glad to see that some talks are going in that direction of like, here are the problems that I had implementing this technology or working on this thing. But most of them are still, look at how clever I am. I can talk through the documentation in 45 minutes, right? But I'm really glad that you were here with us today, Joydip, to talk about this. And I'm so very thankful that you were able to come back to the show for the second time and talk a little bit more about this. So thank you very much.
No problem. My pleasure. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Modern.net Show with me, Jamie Taylor. I'd like to thank this episode's guest for graciously sharing their time, expertise, and knowledge with us. Be sure to check out the show notes for a bunch of links to some of the stuff that we covered and a full transcription of the interview. The show notes, as always, can be found at the podcast's website, and there'll be a link directly to them in your podcatcher. And don't forget to spread the word. Leave a rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. Head over to .netcore.show/review for ways to do that. Reach out via our contact page at .netcore.show/contact, or join our Discord server at .netcore.show/discord, all of which are linked in the show notes. But above all, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I hope that I'll see you again next time for some more .NET goodness. I'll see you again real soon. See you later, folks.